I'm here right now with Leslie Chang. Leslie, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Thank you.
Leslie's one of the featured guest speakers at this weekend's Original Thinkers Festival. And so before we talk about that, I just want to hear what your Telluride story is. This is a way we typically kind of bring people on and let the audience know who they're seeing and who they're listening to by way of their Telluride story.
Yeah, I actually have a Ridgeway story.
Okay, that's good. I'm a Ridgeway.
Yeah, okay. So I was living in China with my husband, and we moved back to the States in 2007. And it took about 6 weeks to ship our stuff from China to Long Beach in outside LA. And in that time, we drove around Colorado and New Mexico looking for a place to live. And they said, okay, by the time your goods arrive at the dock, you have to give us an address. So we were driving around looking at places. And the minute we got to Ridgeway in this area, the San Juans, and it was just, as you know, breathtaking and remote, and nobody knew about this place, but it was amazing. But it was also close enough to Montrose Airport that we could go in and out when we had to do book tours and interviews and things like that.
So you were there, you made that your permanent home at that time, but you were traveling a lot.
Yeah, so we made that our permanent home, had a couple kids, and then in 2011 we moved to Egypt. So we had spent 10 years in China as reporters, and then we spent about 5 years in Egypt. But every summer we would come back to southwestern Colorado, and this is our home.
Good. Well, and now we're neighbors.
Yes.
You and I.
Yes, a couple miles away.
So tell us a little bit about what you do professionally, your career. You've already said you're a reporter, a journalist, but tell us what you've been doing over the years, and then we'll lead up to what your current focus has been over the past several years.
So I initially worked in China as a reporter for the Wall Street Journal for about 10 years. And while I was there, I started working on a book about factory workers in China. So I eventually decided to leave the paper and just become a full-time writer. And over the years, my focus has become kind of writing about women in the developing world, and how they work and how they live and how their lives change or don't change.
So your book, Factory Girls, talks about these Chinese migrant workers, females, that are moving from the country to the city to take factory jobs. And what for me was so sort of profound about this was it really changed my way of thinking about these people. You know, because I think of them as sort of anonymous, you know, sort of these automatons, but these are real people, obviously, with real stories, and they don't have the stories that I thought they might have. Can you talk a little bit about what you found out in China?
Yeah, that was my starting point as well. I felt like a lot of people had written about factory workers and was always treating them as automatons, as you say, kind of robotic workers, or like almost slaves, like they're being forced to do this work, they're getting injured, sometimes they're being killed. And I was thinking that if you look at the average worker's life, it might be very different from what we see from the outside. It might not be so full of pathos and suffering, but it might also have an aspect of opportunity or change. So I went down to a huge factory city called Dongguan in southern China near Hong Kong. And I just spent time getting to know young women workers on the streets, and eventually I became close with two of them, and I followed their lives over a couple years. And I found that going out from the village to the city brought incredible change to their lives, not only economic, but also emotional and personal. It changed the way they saw the world, who they wanted to marry, how they wanted to raise their children, how they wanted to talk to their parents. Everything about them changed.
So all these kinds of growth and development opportunities that we don't necessarily credit. When we think about it, we think about these migrant workers in China slaving away so that we can wear our footwear, our jackets, our bags that we carry on our shoulders, that kind of thing. We've got this sort of guilt-driven sort of perception, which you sort of exploded.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I feel like people are very well-meaning, and they're thinking, well, these workers are so much poorer than me, I must be exploiting them, and isn't it terrible? And there were certain places where they would have boycotts against Chinese-made products. And when you look at the workers, their context is not our life. Their context is their own life, and where they're coming from, and what life their parents have had, and how different their life can be after they move to the city, work in the factory, learn some skills, make some money. They can really change. They can become city people. They can change what they want from the world, from life.
Which makes eminently good sense. It's just we weren't looking at it through that lens.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense that you look at it from your own lens. I think it's a particularly American quality to look at things from our own perspective. And I just wanted to kind of turn that upside down and look at the world from their perspective.
And Were you born in China? Or you,
I was born in the U.S.,
you
but
were
my
born in the
parents
US.
came from China.
And so you grew up speaking Chinese.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, let's talk about Egypt, because after China, you went and did a similar thing in Egypt. Right?
Yeah, so my husband is a writer as well, and after China, we came back to the States for a couple years, and we always wanted to move back overseas to a place that was completely new and different, learn a different language, and we kind of focused on the Middle East as another part of the world, like China, that is hugely important, but I think vastly misunderstood, and the lens through which we generally see the Middle East is political, and I was curious about the economic and the social aspects of ordinary life there.
And what did you find out?
Yeah, so I ended up, this was not my plan to become the factory
Right.
reporter, but I ended up looking at women who were working in different garment factories around Egypt, mostly in rural areas, and again, got to know a few women. And what I found was vastly different, because in China, you could see that with the economy booming, young women could get jobs, make a lot of money by their standards, and change their lives,
A lot of mobility.
and change how their parents saw them. You know, but in Egypt, it's a very different story. The economy is not growing quickly, and the whole traditional structure of values and expectations, especially for young women, is still very much intact. Even though Egypt is part of the globalization trend, even though lots of tourists go to Egypt and they're usually blown away by how kind the people are and how beautiful the sites are, it's still a very, very traditional place. So what I found was that these young women could be just as capable and talented and charismatic as the ones I met in China, often more so. They could work and make money, and still their lives could not change at all. Like their husbands could still treat them in a very condescending way, patronizing way, not value their income, not value what they learned in the factory. And that kind of blew me away, because after China, my lens was that if you allow women to work, they can change their lives. And in Egypt, it's if you allow women to work, that in itself might not change anything, you know, and it shows how deeply those traditions can hold, even in the modern world.
Great. So you'll be presenting this weekend at the Original Thinkers Festival, the inaugural festival. Are you excited? Are you looking forward to it?
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
I wanted just to look at my notes. So that I think the title of the program is "This Is Her Country," and then it goes on to say how to smash the global patriarchy, one story and one voice at a time, which is a cool title for a program. So that's what you're going to be participating in.
Yeah, I'm going to be sharing the stories of a few young women in China and in Egypt, and the ways in which they smash the patriarchy through their lives, and in the ways in which they don't. And we have to look at both sides to acknowledge that this is not an easy battle that they're fighting.
Good. Well, we wish you the best of luck with this weekend's show. We thank you very much for coming in, Leslie. It's been really nice to have you on the set. What you're talking about is really, really interesting, and people are going to be in for a treat if they go and catch you on Saturday, is it? At the
Sunday.
Sunday at the conference center, or the Big Idea, I think they call it.